We can do better than that. And boost our Bible school. All right. Who is excited to be here for night 2? Okay, so we just had a repeat of last night. This side looks really excited. This side, okay. Let's try that again. Are you guys excited over here? Are you guys excited over here? Much better, much better. So, who was here last night? All right. Who brought a friend tonight? Oh. You guys remember our award for who brings the most over all 3 nights? The Courage Medal. Who's going to win the Courage Medal the last night? Who brings the most? All right, we'll see. Okay. All right, do you guys remember our other medals? We have the Participation Medal, which is what? Who can tell me? Katie Bell? Who can help her out? What does the Participation Medal mean? Mason. Yeah. It's pretty self-explanatory, isn't it? Participate, right? Sing when we sing, pray when we pray, be quiet when we quiet. Yeah. Which brings us to our next one, the Quiet Medal. Now that one, we're all good at being quiet, right? Yeah. Yes, Bo.
It means when your teacher's talking, it means like you're silent.
That's right. And you do that really good, don't you? Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. He was kind of hesitant. I don't know whether. All right, then our last one is what class grew the most? All right, so who thinks they grew the most tonight? Okay, we get a bunch of hands. I guess we'll see later on. All right. So who can tell me what we talked about last night? Who wants what story? Aniston. The people who got thrown into the fire. Very good. Who can tell me who those people were? Charlie. Good job. Very good. And did they burn up? No. Who saved them? Angel. Yeah, God was with them, right? That's right. Because they stood up for what was right. Exactly. All right. How about you guys want to do a song? You want to do a fun song? How about the Hippo song? Who knows the Hippo song? All right. Well, we got to stand up for this one. See, we did potato chip last night. Hippo song tonight. Okay. Are we ready? All right. In the beginning, God made the seas and the forest filled with trees. He made the mountains up so high. On the top, He placed the sky. God's fingerprints are everywhere, just to show how much He cares. And in the middle, He had so much fun. He made a hippo that weighed a ton. Hip, 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 hippopotamus. Hip, hip, hooray, God made all of us. Hip, 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 hippopotamus. Hip, hip, hooray, God made all of us. I had some pictures up there, but it's not working, so. All right, next. In the beginning, God made the seas and the forest filled with trees. He made the mountains up so high. On the top, He placed the sky. God's fingerprints are everywhere, just to show how much He cares. And in the middle, He had lots of fun. He made a kangaroo that weighed a ton. Kangaroo. Hip, hip, hooray, God made me and you. Kangaroo. Hip, hip, hooray, God made me and you. In the beginning, God made the seas and the forest filled with trees. Made the mountains up so high. God's fingerprints are everywhere, just to show how much He cares. And in the middle, He had lots of fun. He made a manatee that weighed a ton. Manatee. Hip hooray, God made. Manatee. Hip hip hooray, God made you and me. All right, have a seat. Let me get my breath.
Hey, everybody!
Hey, Luke. Luke, I don't think we're supposed to be out here yet. Luke, there's nobody here. I thought VBS was tonight. Luke, I don't see anybody.
Lily, let me fix this. Hold on. Let me just fix that.
Luke,
Here,
seriously, man, hold on.
What's going on? I'm so confused.
I'll take care of it.
Thanks, bro.
There it is. You see us now?
Oh, hi, everybody.
Oh.
I'm so embarrassed.
As you should be.
Hi, guys. How's it going?
So, Luke, were you limping around when you came up?
Yeah, my leg is killing me.
What do you mean your leg is killing me? Did you guys race again today?
No. This was because of a different activity at the Ninja Warrior camp today.
Man, I still cannot believe you guys are going to a 3-day Ninja Warrior camp. That is so awesome. You know, I wish they had that when I was a kid. Would you guys like to go to a 3-day Ninja Warrior camp? Yeah! That sounds like fun, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's basically the best thing you'll ever go to. I mean, besides VBS, of course. Woo-woo!
So, Luke, how in the world did you manage to get hurt?
Well, you remember I was telling you last night how I don't like to sweat?
Yes.
You know, I have a fear of sweating. Well, I mean, I think I'd rather go to one of those his shoes, her shoes seminars than, go to the sweat.
Luke. Wayne is right there in the audience.
Oh, what?
Come on now. You're not even married. You ain't old to be married yet. You shouldn't be thinking about that. My wife dragged me to that, and it was awesome. I loved every minute of it. Thank you, Wayne.
I know. It just sounded good. I do have to give props to Lily today, though.
Oh, yeah? Why is that?
Oh, Luke, you don't have to. It wasn't that big of a deal.
What? Are you kidding me? You are great. So, Bo, our camp instructor, he set up an obstacle course for us today. It had all kinds of cool stuff like balance beams and hurdles and ladders and monkey bars. It was sweet. Our camp instructor told us the first team to get through the monkey bars and to finish the course would get a pizza party at dinner. Well, Lily's team was right in front of me, and when we got to the monkey bars, I was trying to beat her because if I did, my team would have won. Well, as I was about to pass her for the win, that's when it happened.
What happened, Luke? Come on, finish your story, bud.
Well, my hands started to sweat. I got scared, and I slipped and fell to the ground. And when I fell, I hurt my leg.
Oh, man. Sounds like it hurt. I'm sorry to hear that. So I guess, does that mean the girls won?
No, see, that's when Lily came to the rescue. She came back, and instead of finishing the race, she helped me and crossed the finish line in front of, and I crossed the finish line in front of her, which meant our team won.
Wow.
Her team was yelling at her, Bo. They were wanting her to leave me and finish the race, and instead she did what was right and helped a friend.
Lily, that was an incredible thing you did. And the fact you showed enough courage to stand up to your team and stop and help a friend, that's amazing.
Thanks, guys. It wasn't that big of a deal. I saw my buddy Luke in trouble, and I knew that was most important, no matter what my team thought about me.
Well, that's great, Lily, and what a great example for all of us. You know, it reminds me of a story in the Bible about a woman who showed courage to stand up and protect her people from danger. And that's what we're going to learn about tonight. You guys want to hear that story? Does that sound like a good story?
Yeah.
Yes!
Woo!
About a woman who had courage? Absolutely. So I'll tell you what, why don't we tell Luke and Lily bye, and let's get ready to go to Bible class.
All right, bye, guys. You guys have fun in class. All right, bye-bye.
All right. Okay, we are going to go to our Bible classes now. And so we're going to exit, like we said, one by one. And remember, what medal's at stake? The quiet medal, okay? So we exit very quietly, okay? And after class, listen really good because I may ask you some questions. Maybe we can get Luke and Lily out here again. You guys want to see Luke and Lily later tonight? All right. Okay. All right, babies, let's lead the way. Tiptoe, tiptoe in God's house. Tiptoe, tiptoe in God's house. Tiptoe, tiptoe in God's house. Tiptoe very. Maybe.
Yeah, there's a button right at the top of that. Okay, I got it.
Well, glad everybody's here again tonight. There's some new faces. I think we got a record crowd so far last night. So we had 119 last night. Most of that the last couple of years. So really good turnout. We're blessed with Logan Hackworth last night bringing a lesson to us, and really blessed again to have Wayne Roberts with us. Really excited, and we got really good to hear him tonight. So I've got a few things to introduce him, and then Chris will lead us in a word of prayer, and we'll turn it over to Wayne. He's been in full-time ministry for over 20 years. He has served churches in Colorado, California, and Oklahoma, as well on the adjunct staff of the Bear Valley Bible Institute of Denver. He has worked in the past as a youth minister, deacon of communications, Bible class teacher, education department director, and director of Vacation Bible School. He's done extensive study in homiletics, which is the art of preaching, and has been involved in the young men's training camps for more than 20 years. I think you got one going on this week, don't you? At Northern Conference, right? He's the co-director of the Mighty Men's Mentoring Conference in Texas, and some of us have been to that. He is the organizer of the True Conference for the equipping of churches that are ready to take their congregation to the next level of service. He holds a Bachelor of Biblical Studies degree from the Bear Valley Bible Institute of Denver, and has done undergraduate work at Oklahoma Christian University and the Kansas City School of Religious Studies. Married to his wife Tammy in 1981. He's got 5 grown children and 10 grandchildren. Their current project is the His Shoes, Her Shoes marriage seminars. Kind of heard about. No, it is good. he did drag me to that on our anniversary, as all the men. But it was painful. It was a great seminar. Appreciate all the work you guys do for not only your families, but for other families and. So at this time, we'll take any more time from him. So thank you so much for being here.
Let's bow together. Our Heavenly Father, we're thankful for an opportunity to be here together this evening. We're thankful, Lord, that you blessed us, that we can have this Vacation Bible School. We're thankful for the young ones that have showed up tonight. We're thankful for the families that have brought them. We pray, Lord, that as the teachers teach during this time, that you bless them. We pray that your word is taught tonight. We pray that you'll open even the youngest of hearts to your word, Lord, that might be instilled into them who you want them to be. Lord, we're thankful at this time for Wayne. We're thankful for the lesson he's about to bring to us. We pray, Lord, that you bless us, that we might be receptive to your word. We're thankful for him and the work that he does, and we pray that you'll continue to bless him and bless those that come into contact with it. Lord, we're most thankful for the sacrifice of your Son, Jesus, on the cross. We're thankful for the hope that provides us. We pray if we haven't lived lives of gratitude for that sacrifice, you'll forgive us and help us to do better. We pray that you'll make us more like him. It's through his name we pray. Amen.
You guys know how to make somebody feel right at home. Because I walked in and I was at first greeted like a guest. Ernie came up and introduced himself and others introduced themselves. And, they kind of make over you. They ask, who are you and where are you from and why are you here? And somebody even acted excited when I said, I'm Wayne Roberts. They went, oh, like that was something really big. I didn't know that until tonight, that was anything. And then all of a sudden, the puppets come out and you went from treating me like a guest to treating me like family. I like it better when you treat me like a guest. Sometimes you go to places and they want to know everything about you. When they start treating you like family, they say something like, you walk in and they go, hey Wayne, and they go on about their business. Or they find a way to insult you. And on top of that, Chris said he was going to make me feel better. I'm not as sorry as I am. It's not turned on, is it? Okay. Oh, wow. You guys sure know how to make someone feel right. And I didn't know if they were recording this, but seriously, it's good to be here. This is the very first time I've ever been to Bridge Creek, though I know Chris and I know Bo, and I have met some others of you at a couple of different occasions. So I'm really glad. I'm sorry that my wife Tammy is not here with me. Her plan was to be here, but she spent last week about an hour south of Dallas, Texas at a girls' camp. And she forged through with a sinus, throat, lung, whatever it was, and she's still trying to get over that. And though we are only about 25 minutes from here, it was best that she stay home. So I apologize. It just gives me a reason for her to come back and meet all of you, and you can treat her like family, and maybe the puppets will come and insult her as well. But to add insult to injury, Chris comes up and he goes, you come, that's just what happens. I was the subject last week. So not only did I go from guest to family, now I'm in the same category as Chris. So we just probably ought to just tiptoe on out here. In fact, I was worried for a while that everybody was going to tiptoe out and I was going to be sitting here. I still would have preached because that's what I do, but I would have done it to an empty room. And I like Vacation Bible School. In fact, I love Vacation Bible School. I had the opportunity to direct Vacation Bible Schools for more than 20 years before I finally just ran out of jumping. But I didn't know the hippo song. And I don't know if you know this, but the hippopotamus is the only animal that cannot jump. And so it would have been the perfect animal for me, because I would never have had to jump while singing that song. But I like it. I like the enthusiasm. I like seeing the kids learn. And as you who have had any experience with Vacation Bible Schools, you know it's always an opportunity to hear those great stories of the Bible. There is a place for us to learning all the deep truths and for us to consider and to postulate and to even at times argue over truths. But sometimes it's nice to step back and to see those powerful stories unfold as God reveals them, and tonight is no different. As tonight we'll be considering not only the book, but the person and the story of Esther. We're going to make some references to the book, but you're welcome to try to find some of those references as we go along. We're not going to do a whole lot of page turning, because I think it's good that we hear some of these stories the ways that they first were received, and that is when they were told. From fathers to children, from mothers to their young, from husbands to their wives, and those who were leaders to those who were the followers. And so tonight we're going to take ourselves back a long time ago, almost 500 years before the coming of Jesus Christ, just to set the stage a little bit, because it occurs before the book of Esther. Babylonian captivity is the period that just precedes it. God's people, the Jews, had not been obedient to his instruction regarding idolatry, and they had turned their attention and their worship to false gods, and God promised that he would punish them if they continued, and they did. And so they went to school for 70 years. You would think they would learn their lesson. He had sent them to 40 years of school in the wilderness, but they are a people that are not quick to learn. I'm glad we're not like them, right? But they, in fact, are those that are taken off into Babylonian captivity. The Babylonians are the greatest empire in the world at the time. They rule the world. They have taken control of it. However, by the time that Esther comes along, the Babylonians are not the most powerful empire, the most powerful nation. The Persians have taken over this particular, or have taken over that role of being the leaders, and that's where we find Esther and her family. Now, at this period of time, we don't have the time to look at the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, but at the end of this 70 years, Jews begin to return to Jerusalem. The temple is rebuilt, the walls are rebuilt around the city, and the nation, though it never returns to its full glory, it does return back to Jerusalem and is reunited with God and is again cared for by God, at least for a time. But not everybody went back to Jerusalem, and so as I put it, we find that, if you will, if you just turn to Esther chapter 1, we find that it begins with, now it took place in the days of Ahasuerus, that he reigned in India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. Now, it's nice that Esther begins this way because it isolates this king from others that bear his name. It is believed, and I think there is substantial data to support the fact that this is Xerxes the First, and that he is a historical character, and the events that unfold in the book of Esther are historical events. In fact, this isn't a story like a bedtime story. It's not some kind of fiction or fantasy. It is a real unfolding of real people in real time. And that's something hard for us to realize sometimes, I think, when we look at Scripture. Abraham didn't know that he was a Bible character. He just knew that he was Abraham, right? Even King David, who was of some renown in the nation, didn't really know that he was going to be a Bible character. And Esther, though she behaves in a way that was characteristic or fitting for one who we might admire as a Bible character, that she was just a person. In fact, a girl, a very young girl, who is placed in a circumstance that I think even the most mature and wise would find difficult. And what happens in her life, I believe, has great lessons for young women, for young men, in fact, for all of us. And as time allows us, hopefully, we'll be able to explore that. So here's what happens. We find that this group of exiles, Jews, are living in the lands of the Persians. The Persians are not Jews. They are captives of sorts, but they're now captives by choice. And so they're there, and we find this king. He is a prideful king. We are told by history that he was a charismatic, he could really influence people kind of king. He also was a very vicious king, as was characteristic of the Persians. He was not entitled to the throne. In other words, he was not of the royal lineage, but he usurped that throne. He took possession of it by his power, by his influence, and then to kind of solidify his place, now that he has arrived, he marries a woman who is of the royal line, and her name is Vashti. And so Vashti becomes not his wife, but one of his many wives, as he has a stable of wives and a stable of concubines that are there as his property, as his possession, for his pleasure. And Vashti is the one that he sets the task, or sets the role of being queen. Now, we might think, because of what we know about Great Britain, for example, well, that queen, that's a pretty good deal. Really, it just means that Vashti was his favorite trophy in his trophy case. Vashti is a trophy wife because she is extremely beautiful. They don't really live as husband and wife the way that we would hope a husband and wife would live, but she lives at his beck and call. When he calls for her, she comes. When he does not call for her, she stays away. And even though she might have some queenly responsibilities, for the most part, she is nothing more but a glorified servant in his kingdom. Well, he decides to have a party. And I remember about when I turned 50 years of age. It was a long, long time ago, but I remember that I wanted to have a party of all of my friends. And everybody kind of mocked me. You're hosting your own party? And I said, yeah, you know what? I don't want any of those lame gifts, where they make fun of you and there's puppets and all that kind of stuff. I don't want that kind of stuff. I want to have a good party with good food and my good friends. And so I hosted a party. Well, that's what the king does. The king's going to host a party. In fact, it's quite a party. It lasts a half a year, 180 days, it says, in which he calls in all of the individual governors, all the prime ministers, all of the individual rulers in his kingdom. He calls them to Susa, which is the capital, and he has this glorious party. In fact, it's not even enough. He finally says, we're going to have a party for another 7 days, and everybody's invited. So for the first party, he says, here's what I want. I want everything. I want food. I want wine. I want dancing. I want everything decorated. And the description of the parties that were held there are incredible. I mean, everything down to the mosaic floor tiles. It was quite a big deal. And there was only one rule at this party. The rule was everything goes. He tells to his servants, he says, don't let anybody leave here, if you will, unsatisfied. Whatever they ask for, you give it to them. Pull it from my storehouse, because I want everybody to see how great and how wealthy I am. And then invite all the people from around for 7 more days, for a whole nother week. And he has this great party. So as that unfolds, that's going to become the setting for what's about to happen. Because as he's showing off his beautiful palace, he's showing off this glorious banquet table, he summons Queen Vashti to display herself in front of everyone. We don't know for sure, but there seems to be at least the suggestion that she came through wearing a crown, or was to come through wearing a crown and nothing else. In other words, he wanted everybody to see how beautiful, not that she was adorned, but how beautiful she was. It's an interesting story. I wish we had more about Vashti. I don't know the reason why, but Vashti chose to forsake the command of the king. And that day and age, that just wasn't done. It is a Jewish legend that she had something going on dermatologically. That she had this, she didn't want to display herself because she herself was prideful. In other words, I just can't go out tonight not looking like this. There are some that say she wasn't about to parade around naked in front of anybody other than her husband. Whichever end of the spectrum, it doesn't really matter because it didn't concern the king. The king says, I'm done with you. In fact, he calls in all of his counselors, his wise individuals that he would consult with, and he says, what do I do about Vashti? I think that he probably was asking legally, what can I do? I mean, I need to have her out as the queen, but I want to make sure that when it's all said and done, I look like the good guy. And they said, oh, because that's how counselors of this day are. You're right about that. In fact, you got to do something about it, not only for you, but for everybody, because if it gets around the neighborhood that the queen told the king, every other wife in town is going to be telling their husband, listen, if Vashti doesn't have to answer to the king, then I don't have to answer to you, and we know how that's going to go. So for your sake, for the kingdom's sake, you've got to get rid of Vashti, and that's in fact what he does. But he seems to be, though he's angry for a point, he gets, as is often the case, kind of cooled off. And he starts kind of thinking about that absence of a queen. He's got a whole house full of wives. But he's like, you know what I need? I need me another king. I need me another queen. What am I going to do? And here's what's interesting, because in this story, you're going to have everything. You're going to have intrigue, you're going to have deception, you're going to have pride, you're going to have genocide, you're going to have rape, or at least you're going to have human trafficking. This is a big story here. And so the suggestion is made, and it falls on the king's ears, and he likes it, that they should gather all the young maidens. It would have probably been those who were virgins, putting them probably at a very young age, anywhere from, we'll say 14 till about 17, because others after that began to be kind of finding husbands, finding spouses. And so they were all to be gathered, and here's the way this was going to work. They would put them all in charge of one of these eunuchs. Those were those individuals that have been made such a way that they wouldn't be a problem when it comes to a house full of women. And so one of them was in charge of this group, and he would send them one by one into the king. And the king, and I don't want to be coarse or crass, but the king would test drive them. They would go in the morning, they would spend the night with him, and then they would leave, and then they would go to, kind of to the used pile. So the king is going through these maidens, and he goes, I'll try this one tonight, and then I'll cast her over here, because, she's damaged goods now because she's been with me. Bring me another one. That's the sordid scene that we have of this king. It is here that we're introduced to two more characters. In fact, they're going to be instrumental in this story, and I'm just challenged to believe that the book of Esther should simply be called the book of Esther. I really believe that at the least it should be called Mordecai and Esther, and here's why. Because not only do we have the heroine that is the subject of the book, that is the subject of my assignment, but we have a man by the name of Mordecai, a Jew, and he is going to actually play a fundamental role throughout this story, and before the book is done, it is he that ultimately is exalted and not Esther, at least as far as the text goes. And so Mordecai is a Jew, and he is raising a much younger cousin, the daughter of his uncle or aunt, and they have died, and he's raising her, and her name is Esther. He's doing everything right as far as a parent would be, at least it seems so, in the way that Esther's turning out. She's a beautiful young lady. She is well behaved. In fact, one would even say she's exceptional. She is so exceptional that when she is brought in to this human trafficking, the Me Too generation has nothing on what was happening in Persia, that the eunuch took a fancy to her. Not sexually, but he recognized how fine she was. And he preferred her amongst all the others, and when he brought her to the king preferred her to, and is going to make her Queen Esther. And so now we have a Jewish woman who is going to be made the queen of the Persian Empire. That's a pretty big jump right there, right? I mean, it was big enough that the king was not of the royal lineage, but he was at least a Persian. Now we have a Jew, and she's going to be the queen. Unfortunately, she's going to be another trophy wife, even though it seems as if she pulls on his heartstrings in such a way that she really takes him by storm or by surprise. We'll see that more. So back to Mordecai. Mordecai finds favor with the king because as he is constantly going by the gate around the king's palace, he's checking on Esther even after she goes in. He wants to know how she's doing before she was presented to the king and after the king. And while he's there, there are a couple of guards. And they're the ones that keep people from going in and people going out. And Mordecai overhears the fact that they are plotting to kill the king. Have you ever been, anybody here work at Walmart before I use this illustration? You ever been at Walmart and there's no cashiers, but there's 5 people over here complaining about their job, right? That's what this was, right? I don't know who was doing the garden because they're just sitting there. They're mad about their pay. They're mad about the way they're treated. They're mad about the way the king's running it, or they're just plain old mad, but they're sitting there and they're making a plot to kill the king, and Mordecai overhears this. He gets word to the king about the plot, and the king then comes and investigates it, or the king has it investigated, finds out it's true, and he puts the 2 on the gallows. And we probably ought to clarify this because the gallows are going to play into our story later. Don't think Wild West, okay? Don't think the hangman's noose, because the Persians weren't in the hanging business. They were in the shish kebab business. What they would do is they would put out a big stake and they would impale the whole body or sometimes just the head of their enemies. In fact, they would like to line their roads with all of these stakes in the grounds with their enemies hanging on it and the buzzards plucking at it as a reminder, don't mess with us. And so he has those 2 executed. Now we have, and it's kind of interesting, I really wish we could talk about it a little bit more, but you know, Esther's real name isn't Esther. It's Hadassah, okay? Same way we talked about last night, the lesson was on who? Shadrach, Meshach, and to bed we go. And I don't know how long it laid. No, and Abednego, right? That was their Babylonian names, named after Babylonian gods. Hananiah, Zechariah, Mishael, those were their Jewish names. Esther's real name actually is not Esther. Esther is a Babylonian name that is given to her, and it's interesting because she's named after a Persian goddess, a Sumerian goddess, Ishtar. And she is the goddess of love, sexuality, fertility. On our calendar, somewhere around March or April, we never can nail it quite down, is Easter, right? Named also after her. You see the similarities between that and Esther, and that's why things like eggs, the idea of fertility, the idea of resurrection, all those things got merged together when Christianity looked for a more acceptable way to deal with some of this. That doesn't mean if you celebrate the Easter Bunny, you're pagan in your worship. I'm just saying that's where that all came from. The name actually means star. It's why I entitled tonight's presentation, A Star in a King's Crown, because that's what Esther really is. It would seem as if the king is the one that wants to put himself in the spotlight, and before we're done, we find that the spotlight shines itself on the real star of this story, and that's Esther herself, and rightly so. Also, the name can mean myrtle, okay? Not like some old antiquated name, but myrtle, the plant. Because the flowers, when they come to full bloom, it is described as seeing the stars that twinkle in the night. And again, we have kind of this link of stars. That is if you are a Persian. But if you are a Jew, it means something different. It carries with the idea of something that is hidden, something that is secret, something, if you will, that is hidden for the purpose of deceit. Now, it doesn't say it in the text, but more often than not in the Old Testament, we find that the names of individuals play into the story fundamentally. And so Esther is the star, and there is a lot of things that are hidden here, which brings us to the dun-dun, the villain. We have Mordecai, a hero. We have Esther, a heroine. And now we have Haman. Haman is, well, he's a pretty ambitious guy. He's described as an Agagite. It is that he's well respected, probably of either a high-ranking official or maybe even a military leader, and as such, he has risen in the ranks to be the very right-hand man of the king. But he is not a very good guy. He, just like the king, is prideful, and though the king maybe doesn't realize it, Haman may have his eyes set on the throne himself, and usually if you're not in the bloodline, the only other way to get the throne, or more appropriately, right, that's the way it's going to be. And so Haman comes onto the scene, and he is really, he's really showing himself to the point that everybody admires him. In fact, he is put in such a high place that the people actually bow before him. They are honoring him. By royal edict, it is that you are to bow before Haman. And, oh boy, it's like, oh, Haman, it's great to see Haman, nice to see you. Very Eastern in all of this approach, much like an Oriental heritage where they would bow in honor. Boy, everybody's bowing except somebody. Somebody is not going to bow, and that's going to be Mordecai. And that's going to make Haman angry. And it is going to be the fodder for everything that's going to follow, because he decides that he needs to get rid of that he needs to get rid of Mordecai. In fact, he's not going to be satisfied with just Mordecai. He wants to eradicate all of the Jews. Now, I don't want to compare them because it's probably not an apples to apples, but we look at the atrocities of Nazi Germany, where Hitler sought to eradicate the Jewish people through imprisonment, through incineration, through torture and testing. Well, Haman wants them just all dead. He's cutting through to the express line to get rid of all the Jewish people. And so he goes into the king, because the king's going to be the one to give this order. And as the real suck-up that he is, he's like, you know what, king? He says, I don't know if you know this, but we got problems in town. And the problems are this one group of people. They're a weird bunch of people. They do weird things. They have weird beliefs. But worst of all is they're not interested in following your commands. Now, I'll just tell you, for a king that's full of pride, that's the one thing that they have no interest, or that they have no toleration for, and that is for someone who is going to not follow their commands. And so he persuades the king to write an instruction to annihilate the Jews. In fact, it goes one step further. The king says, you know what? You do it. However you want to do it, I'm going to take off my royal ring and give it to you. That means you write whatever you want, you emboss it with my seal, it is law. I'm going to put you in charge of this. And so Haman decides that that's what he's going to do. He writes this edict, and the word gets to Mordecai about what's coming, that the Jews are going to be annihilated. It is now that we're faced with this. The story's going to come to an abrupt end, right? Here were the Jews, they were in captivity, they have a chance to return, but they don't, and they're all dead. Okay, that puts an end to this story, but that's not the way it is, because Mordecai is able to get a message to Esther. He gets the message to Esther that her people are going to be executed. He does so via kind of an in-between, a go-between, but as he does so, he gives this instruction. He said, your people, the Jews, by edict of the king, by Haman's order, are going to be executed. And to top that off, don't think that pretty little Esther sitting in the palace is going to be protected, because even though to this point you have hidden by my instruction your identity as a Jew, it's going to be found out, and there's going to be no more Queen Esther either. You're going to be dead too. And so Esther receives this, and she is overwhelmed with sorrow about this the same way that Mordecai is. And so Mordecai says, I need you to go to the king on behalf of your people, the Jews. Now, here's what that entails. First of all, that means that which has been hidden about her heritage, that she's going to have to unveil it. That's going to be bad news. You know, I've been pretending to be something I wasn't. You need to know I'm a Jew. And on top of that, she's going to have to go in to the king, and this is the way that it works. You don't go into the king until the king comes to you, until the king calls for you. Esther says, I haven't been called in a while. You know, he's got a whole barn full of young maidens over here. He says, I've not been called. I just don't get to walk up in the throne room. And that familiar line in which basically Mordecai says to her, you know, maybe it is that you have risen to this position as queen for this moment. That's the reason why you are where you are, is to be a spokesman for your people. And after some contemplation, Esther finally says, well, I'm going to do it. And if I perish, I perish. So what she does is she goes to the court outside of the throne room, and I see her kind of walking by in gown, right? She's going back and forth and back and forth. Finally, the king notices her. King summons her and brings her in. And he says, you know, you're not just waiting around here for no reason. What do you need? It's here that we find out that Esther seems to have maybe a little more of his heart than anyone else. He says, you tell me what you want, and I'll do it for you up to half the kingdom. In other words, I'm not going to give you control, but I'll tell you what, I'll give you half everything I have. It's all yours. And she says, well, if I found favor, here's what I'd like. I'd like to have a banquet. I'd like to have a dinner. I'd like to host that, and I'd like to invite you and your right-hand man, Haman, to the party. You know, that's like, hey, what do you want from me? Oh, just let me serve you. Your wish be granted, right? So the king agrees to that. So there's this first dinner, there's this first banquet, and there's all this food, all this celebration. Esther's got something planned, and that's going to happen very soon. But in between, or following this, we find that Haman goes home. Haman goes home and he's bragging. Oh, it was quite the spread. He goes, I was amongst the guests to honors, me and the king. I mean, I'm being celebrated the same way the king is. It was a great feast and all this, but I'll tell you what's really ruining it. I can't even enjoy this celebration because in the back of my mind is that Mordecai. I got to get rid of him. And somebody says, I got an idea. Why don't you show your power? Why don't you handle it the Persian way? You know, they used to say, we're going to handle it the Chicago way. Well, they're going to handle it the Persian way. They said, why don't you build a big old spike 75 feet into the air and hang him on it? That'll set you up as the real guy that everybody should honor. And he goes, that's a good plan. I'm going to go talk to the king about it. Well, while he's home whining and moaning and making this plan, the king, I think he just maybe got bad roast beef, but he's tossing and turning all night. He's not had a very good sleeping experience. The text says he's having trouble sleeping. And so you know how he decides? He says, I need a bedtime story. But not about Three Little Bears and Goldilocks, not about Billy Goat's Gruff, none of those. He says, bring the book that tells all about how great and wonderful I am. And so they come and they begin to read, you know, you have this property and you did this thing. And they get to the part about what happened earlier with Mordecai telling about the plot to assassinate him. And he says, hey, what did we ever do for Mordecai for that? I mean, that was a pretty good thing. He saved my life. Did we ever do? I said, no, we didn't do anything. I mean, he says, didn't we give him a gift card? Did we give him any kind of award? He goes, no. And he goes, well, I got to do something for him. Providentially, I believe, here comes Haman. Haman, he goes, hey, to interrupt you. And the king says, wait, before we get to whatever you have to talk to me about, I need to ask you a question. If you had somebody that you really, really wanted to honor, I mean somebody in the kingdom who had been a great service to you, you can just see Haman. Well, the least I can do, right? And so Haman's listening, and he goes, I mean, what would you do if you really wanted to show him for all the value he was to us? And so Haman goes, well, you know what I'd do? I'd dress him in robes that belong to you. I'm a size 42 regular, right? He says, and then I'd get one of your prize horses, and I would adorn it with the king's adornment for his horse. And I'd put that guy up on that, dressed in those robes on that horse. I'd lead him through town. And I'd pick one of your other really good guys to do it. In other words, here's a really good guy, and he's nothing more than the stable boy. See, Haman's thinking, this is exactly what I'd like. And then the king says, that's a great idea. I want you to do that for Mordecai. What? Right? So here is Haman, who loathes Mordecai, who goes and gets the fine clothing of the king. He brings out a prize stallion. He goes to Mordecai and he dresses him with this, and he puts him up on this, and he's having to lead him around. Do you know how degrading that was for Haman? He is just about to burst, but he knows that he's going to get rid of Mordecai on a stake. He's going to wipe out the Jews, and so, if you will, he grits his teeth, he bears it, because there's another party coming, and he's the guest of honor. So, Esther has another party. She invites the king, she invites Haman as the guests of honor, and she begins to wine them and to dine them, to treat them wonderfully. The king is again moved, and he says, you're building up to something, right? It's kind of like how I said, if I walk home, or I come home one day with a bunch of flowers and it's not a holiday, you know what my wife's first thought is? What'd you do? Right? What'd you do? But he comes in, he says kind of, well, you're building for something. What are you wanting from me? I will give it to you, whatever it is, up to half the kingdom. And she says, well, now that you're asking, here's what's going on. I'm a Jew. And my people, the Jews, by royal edict, are about to be executed. And I'm asking you to spare them. And he says, whoa, whoa, whoa. Who is going to execute them? And here's where that story takes its plot twist. She goes, that guy. The guest of honor, Haman, now becomes the one who is revealed for what he is. And the king says, what should I do? What should I do? And so he goes, hey, over behind Haman's house, there's a 75-foot spike. How about you put him on that? He goes, let it. Boy, Haman's gone. I mean, that's the end of Haman's story. He has him impaled on it. And the king says, I got a problem, though. Once I put my seal on something, I can't revoke it even if you request it. So they kind of make, and we'll speed the story along just a little bit for the sake of time, because I do want to give you some applications, but here's what he says. He says, how about if I make a new law that allows the Jews to defend themselves? In other words, if anybody trying to fulfill the first ordinance to kill the Jews comes to the Jews, they have the right to defend themselves. The text says that many were afraid of the Jews to the point that they themselves became Jews. Okay, you don't become a Jew, right? But the idea is what? They go, I was Persian yesterday, but I heard the Jews can kill anybody. I'm a Jew today, right? I'm whatever it takes not to get myself out there out on one of those sticks out there. And so there is a great celebration, a celebration that is even celebrated amongst Jews today, in a celebration called Purim. Purim is to cast lot, or a dice or lot, and it refers to that which they did before Haman earlier in the story. And at that particular occasion, the story of Esther is read. In fact, it is read with great reverence and great honor, though it is but one book in the Jewish scriptures, what we would call the Old Testament. It is a very important one on this, and it should be for us as well. I thought that it was not enough for us simply to review the story, but I also know that there are some refreshments that await even the adults. So there are lots of lessons we could draw from Esther. If we had the time, we could talk about pride and power versus humility. We could talk about those that deceive, those that live in a world of hidden. I think there's a great lesson in there for women today who feel that they are taken advantage of, and some of who are being taken advantage of, as to how to deal with that circumstance. That doesn't mean that you have to be helpless, that you have to just grin and bear it, but there is a way to show yourself as being admirable in all of that. There is that external beauty versus internal beauty. There is the obvious storyline of good versus evil. But why do we have Esther at all? Here's one of the most interesting pieces of trivia, interesting facts about the book of Esther. And that is the fact that God is never mentioned. God is never mentioned, even amongst Jewish people in the story who are the children of God. Some have said, well, that's because this is a record maybe that was made by Persians, or maybe it is that those Jewish people knew the sacredness of God's name and didn't want to write it, and knew that it would be twisted and somehow it would be spoken and it shouldn't. Or maybe it is that they were afraid that it was the name of Jehovah God, but that it would be changed to some Sumerian god. I don't think so. I think the fact that it is at the very heart of why the book of Esther is written, and that is the fact that you do not hear God mentioned, but you see him working throughout this story. There is no reason for some of these things to have happened. Some of these things don't just happen by happenstance or chance. It is the providence of God. Providence is a word that means before I see, and it speaks of God's operation on a plane that you and I are not aware of. In fact, I'm very hesitant to put my finger on something and say that's providence unless I know that God himself says that it is. But it is the confidence that says even though I can't see him working, I know that he is working. And here's some lessons that I want you to take home with you tonight. Number one, and that is the fact that God uses both righteous and wicked to accomplish his purpose. Every time we say, why do the wicked prosper, seem to prosper? Because sometimes God uses the wicked. Well, how about the righteous? Some of them prosper too. God sometimes uses the righteous. Providence is that which favors those who have character. I mean, Esther is all about characters, only a few of whom have character. And so it is realizing that God is going to bless ultimately those who have that kind of character. And that our prosperity should not be confused with God's preferential providence. In other words, just because somebody has a lot, like a king or like Haman, doesn't necessarily mean that God is on their side, or that if in some way we are debilitated economically, socially, in our gender, in our status in some way, it doesn't mean that God is not in favor of us. It is to recognize that God is working always, even if we don't see it. God sees think about it. God tells Eve, you're going to seed that's going to crush the head of the serpent, and he's going to clip his heel. What? Abraham, you're going to have a seed in which all the nations of the world are going to be blessed. Huh? I mean, root of Jesse, city of Bethlehem, virgin birth. I need more details for some of this. And God says, I'm working through it. Take what I've given you and don't worry about the rest. I think it's important to realize that all of us have a part in God's providential plan. The question is kind of which side of that plan are we going to stand on? It ultimately is a recognition that God's going to work his plan to its fulfillment, and those who are wicked are going to be punished, and those who are righteous are going to be rewarded. I like what one commentator put. This is not my original thought. Providence makes every day a good day because God is working out his plan. Yeah, but it's been a tough day. I know. But God is working out his plan. Today's been a great day. That's good. But God's working out his plan. And so I hope, though there are lots of lessons we can draw from Esther, that that's what you'll take away. that God is working His plan the same way that we saw it unfold in Esther. In generations to come, looking back, we will be able to see how is it unfolded there. And certainly in eternity, we will be able to see it in its full grandeur and go, now it all makes sense. Well, it makes sense to God today, and so you can be encouraged in that. Let's have a word of prayer. Thank you for your kind attention. We'll give you about 12 to 15 minutes to sneak a snack before all the little sticky cotton fingers get to it from whatever craft they're doing tonight. Thank you again for your attention. Let's bow. Father, thank you for the occasion to be together. We're thankful for this opportunity, as has already been mentioned, to strengthen the young that they might grow to be everything that you want them to be. At the same time, Father, let us not believe that we have advanced to the point that there is no longer a place for us to grow. Grow us, Father. Grow us in good times and grow us in difficult times. Turn our attention away from ourselves towards you. Give us the confidence and the comfort that is knowing that you are fulfilling your purpose. A purpose that will accomplish your will ultimately, a purpose that will punish those who are wicked and reward those who are righteous. And help us, Father, to choose righteous, that we might be pleasing in your sight, be a part of accomplishing your will, and receive the reward that awaits for the faithful one day. Thank you for the lives of people like Esther and Mordecai, who have shown us at least a glimpse of what those kinds of individuals look like, and may we be an equal illustration, example, and influence to those around us of those same kind of people. We're thankful for Jesus Christ. That is what gives us our confidence in your plan unfolding, and He is our hope, and it is in His name that we pray. Amen. Thank you, everyone. I'm muted, so I'll let you